Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down week 20 of the NFL season over on Draftkings. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. YouTube tells me around 50% of the people watch these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor to the channel or if you just new and like what you see, consider that subscribe button because it really helps the channel grow. That's obviously going to help me out as well. And if you want to follow me over on social media, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. I do cover other sports besides the NFL, including NASCAR, NBA, MLB, when those sports happen to come up. But I do spreadsheets for all that, projections, cheat sheets, notes, and the Discord chat as well. So if you're interested, links down below. But I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. We got some really good options here. We have Mahomes, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. I left off Tom Brady just because I don't really like him that much on this slate, especially when you compare him to the other quarterbacks here. But I mean, these are three of the best quarterbacks in football. I'd say Mahomes is probably the best quarterback, but this season, Aaron Rodgers, I think he's going to take home the MVP award. He has just been lights out all season long, and the leap Josh Allen made this year compared to last year and the season before that has been absolutely insane. So yeah, three really fun quarterbacks to roster here, so it's definitely going to be hard trying to pick which one you want. But Patrick Mahomes here at $7,600, he's the most expensive one now. I know he's dealing with a concussion, got up really wobbly in that Cleveland game, ended up leaving, never came back. Chet Henne filled in for him. But it sounds like he's going to be good to go. He did return to practice today, which if you don't know when I'm recording this video, it is Wednesday, January 20th. So it sounds like he's going to be good to go, and I have a hard time seeing the NFL not having Patrick Mahomes play in this game. And if that's the case, he's 100% good to go. It's actually a pretty good spot here versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, their defense isn't garbage, but versus quarterbacks this season, they have struggled versus the position. They are 12th DVA versus the pass, which is above average, but they do rank 19th versus quarterbacks. Still allowing less than 250 passing yards per game, less than 1.5 passing touchdowns, but it's really hard to stop the Chiefs' passing offense no matter what defense you are. I mean, the guy's just absolutely insane. He's got elite weapons in Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. He's averaging over 300 passing yards per game, close to 40 passing attempts per game. Looks like they're going to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Sammy Watkins back this week, so even more of an added boost to this offense. So yeah, if you got the money for Mahomes, I do think he is a pretty solid option. They do own the highest implied team total on the slate, above 28 points, and a 53.5 point over/under. Also looks like the weather is going to be pretty nice here. And yeah, I don't think he's an absolute necessity though, because Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers can give you similar upside at cheaper price points. But if you got the money for Mahomes, you can really never bet against the guy. You just have to hope that he doesn't get injured or just gets another concussion. But that's not something we can project. So yeah, I think he's a solid option. But I don't know if he's my favorite quarterback in the slate just because of the price differences for the guys that we have below him. Like Josh Allen, he's below $7,000. I'm not sure that should ever be the case. His upside is just way too high for him to be below $7,000. And they are 3-point dogs here, so if you think the Bills happen to be trailing, it could be a monster game for Josh Allen. Now, I know he struggled last week, only had, 12 DraftKings points versus the Baltimore Ravens, but the Baltimore Ravens defense is definitely a bit better than the Kansas City Chiefs defense. I know they're not the worst defense in the world. They do struggle more versus the run than they do versus the pass, but versus the pass this season, they've kind of just been mid-pack. They're 16th DVA versus the pass, and they've really struggled versus quarterbacks, ranking 24th versus the position, allowing over 21 DraftKings points per game and close to 2 passing touchdowns. Also, Josh Allen gives you a little bit of rushing upside as well. He's averaging half a rushing touchdown per game this season and over 20 yards rushing. So he's always a threat around the goal line, and it gives you a nice added floor to his nice ceiling as well. So yeah, definitely like Josh Allen. I think you can make a case for him being the best quarterback play on the slate relative to his price point, because Mahomes, he's about $600. $700 more expensive. So the extra money could get you another wide receiver, an extra running back that you might want on this slate, and I feel like their upside is very close. Then Aaron Rodgers, he's $1,100 cheaper than Patrick Mahomes, and he's having an excellent season. He also gets a really good matchup here versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it sounds like it's going to be snowing for this game, but I would not be too worried about that because, look, Rodgers has plenty of experience playing in cold weather in Lambeau Field. Have no concerns about that. And snow just doesn't really affect the game too much. Now, if it's windy, it's sleeting, stuff like that, yeah, it can affect the game and affect the offenses, but it's supposed to be just a nice snow, no really any wind concerns there, so I'm not overly concerned about the offenses here. It should be full systems go, and I like Rodgers quite a bit at $6,500. Their team total is only a point below the Kansas City Chiefs, and again, that discount is massive. It could be the difference between getting a guy like Mike Evans or a Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams, something like that in your lineup, and if that's the case, I actually think that's enough just to make me want to go with the cheaper quarterback here. But Rodgers excellent all season long. Played a really tough defense last week in the Los Angeles Rams. Still had a fantastic day. Had a rushing touchdown as well. This game still has a 51-point over-under, so I'm expecting a lot of points to be scored. In the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense definitely has struggled versus the pass in the second half of this season. Very, very tough on the run, but versus the pass, they have started to struggle. I know they're still 5th DVA versus the pass, but they're mid-pack versus quarterbacks, but they really started to struggle versus wide receivers and tight end. And I mean, it's hard to find a better combo than Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams this season. I know you could say the same for Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, or Travis Kelce, but I mean, that combination has just been an absolute fire this season. I have a hard time seeing them stop those guys, although I know all the way back, I want to say week 7 or week 6, whatever week that was, the worst game for Aaron Rodgers all season long was versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, but that was early on in the season. They've definitely gotten a lot worse pass defense-wise versus them, so I still think Aaron Rodgers should have a pretty solid game here. He's playing at home. It's, he's got his chance to get to his second Super Bowl, so I like Rodgers quite a bit. I think on a point-per-dollar basis, he could definitely be the best quarterback play on this slate. So moving on to the running back position. We have Aaron Rodgers' teammate Aaron Jones at $6,500. Now the matchup versus Tampa Bay, it's definitely not my favorite, and it is a bit of a committee here in Green Bay. Now Aaron Jones is definitely the RB1. I mean, there's no concerns about that, but you always see a little bit too much Jamal Williams and AJ Dillon than you'd like to see whenever you roster Aaron Jones. And it was looking like he was going to have a very, very poor day, but to start the second half, he did rip off that 60-yard run, which ended up being a touchdown for him, and a big drive there, which was really the majority of his fantasy points. But this guy is still a very talented running back. He's a 3.5-point favorite at home. He's averaging close to 80 rushing yards per game on about 15 attempts. He's going to be involved through the air as well, about 4.5 targets per game, which equals close to a 15% target share. So he's got a nice floor there as well, and he's always efficient with his touches as well, averaging 5.5 yards per carry this season, which is very good. Now the matchup, this is what I don't love. They are first DVA versus the run, and they're allowing the 6th fewest points per game to their running back position, only 60 rushing yards per game. But the one thing they do struggle at is pass catching running backs. So we know Aaron Jones is going to be involved in the passing game. They're allowing over 6 catches per game and close to 42 receiving yards. So if Aaron Jones is having a tough time on the ground, I could definitely see him getting some dump offs, which should raise his floor. And I think he'll overall have a pretty strong game. I have a hard time seeing the Packers offense struggle too much in this game, especially with the Super Bowl on the line. So I think Aaron Jones should have plenty of scoring opportunities if they get around the goal line. So if you got the money for him, I definitely think he's the best running back to spend up on. He's really the only running back to spend up on, but I have no problems at all fitting him into my lineups, although I'm not sure it's an absolute must because there's some really good wide receivers on the slate like Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, and Stephon Diggs. I don't think you have to spend up Aaron Jones because I would rather get one of those 3 wide receivers over trying to fit in Aaron Jones, but I do think he's a solid play if you happen to have the money for everybody that you want. Then Leonard Fournette at $5,300. So Ronald Jones did return last week. I think he had around 10 to 15 total touches, so it's going to eat into Leonard Fournette's workload a bit, but he was still the lead back. He's going to be involved in the passing game. And this is a pretty good matchup versus Green Bay. And if it is going to be snowy, maybe the Buccaneers run the ball a little bit more, and I think Fournette's a fine option at $5,300, but I still expect him to get around 15 to 20 touches in this game. He's going to be able in the passing game as well. He had 17 carries last week and about 6 targets, so that's still plenty of volume for a guy that's around $5,000. It's also a pretty good matchup on the ground here versus the Green Bay Packers. Their pass defense is pretty good, plus it's going to be snowing, so this would set up well for a good game for the run game if they can get it going, but they're 28th versus running backs, meaning they're allowing the 5th most points per game. They're also 18th DVA versus the run, allowing close to 100 rushing yards per game and close to a rushing touchdown, also over 5.5 catches and close to 50 receiving yards with over a quarter of a receiving touchdown allowed per game. So Leonard Fournette, I just think he's a very solid option here despite Ronald Jones being back and eating into his workload a little bit. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at $5,000. He missed last week, but the assumption that he's going to be good to go, he did return to practice. And if that's the case, only $5,000 in the offense with the highest implied team total on the slate, you can definitely sign me up for that. I think he's a really good point per dollar option. I assume he's going to be very, very high owned. I think a lot of people, if we're going to spend up for wide receivers and tight ends on this slate, like Travis Kelce, Diggs, Tyreek Hill, and Davante Adams, we need some value somewhere. And if we're going to spend up for a quarterback, although you don't have to spend up for a quarterback, let's say you go Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. If you go like Singletary, Clyde Edwards-Helaire that route, maybe you Leonard Fournette in the flex spot, whatever, you should be able to afford at least maybe 2 of those wide receivers and maybe Travis Kelce. I've not tried to play around with lineup construction yet too much, so I could be wrong there, but I assume a lot of people are going to go the Singletary, Clyde Edwards-Helaire route just because of the price points and the good wide receivers and tight ends we have on this slate, but he's a 3-point favorite at home. High supplied teams on the slate should get like 15 to 20 touches here, although I'm assuming Le'Veon Bell and Darrell Williams will still be involved somehow, so maybe he's not going to be an absolute bell cow here, especially from his first game back from injury, but I think he's going to get enough volume to be able to pay off that price point. Kind of a mid-pack matchup here versus the Bills. They're 17th DVA versus the run and 17th versus running backs, allowing close to 100 rushing yards per game and close to a rushing touchdown. So it's not like the greatest match in the world, definitely not the worst matchup in the world either. At 5,000 bucks, I feel like he's just a bit too cheap. Should be involved in the passing game as well, get close to a handful of targets, and that is good enough for me on a PPR site like Draftkings. Then Singletary at 4,500 bucks he definitely disappointed us last week. I thought he was going to have a pretty decent game. Didn't think he was going to get like 20 plus points or anything, maybe if he got into the end zone. But with Zach Moss being out, I definitely thought he'd be a little bit more involved than he was. But it was a tough matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, so I will cut him some slack there. It's definitely an easier matchup here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. They really do struggle versus the run, and Zach Moss is still going to be out, so Singletary is going to be the lead back here. I know Yeldon got a little bit involved, but it wasn't anything too crazy. So Singletary should be lead back here, should get us double-digit touches, and I mean, that's good enough for me. It's above the passing game. And it is a pretty good matchup here. They are 31st DVA versus the run, and they're 25th versus running backs, allowing over 100 rushing yards per game and over 50 receiving yards as well. And if you do think the Bills are trailing in this game, I know they're only 3-point dogs, so it's nothing drastic. I assume this is going to be a very close back and forth game. But if they are trailing by quite a bit, I assume there's going to be quite a few dump offs to Devin Singletary. So I think he's a fine option for the price point. I also assume people are going to go flock right back to him, even though he was chalky and busted last week. So now we'll move on to the wide receiver position. And this is what I'm saying. We're probably going to be spending down for running backs because we have Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs on this slate. And good luck fading these guys. These are three of the best wide receivers in football, and they can absolutely blow up a slate. And if you don't have them, it's definitely not the most fun time in the world. Now, I will say, a chalky wide receiver has gotten 0.3 slates in a row now. It's been John Brown the first slate, then Corey Davis, and then Michael Thomas, of all people, got a goose egg last week. And they've really been the three highest wide receivers on the slate. So I'm just saying, be careful. It's a trend. Now, there's nothing backing that up. And I can't assume any of these guys are going to goose egg. But, man, I've had all three of those guys each time. Now, fortunately, they were high owned enough where it didn't really matter too much in cash games or sometimes even in tournaments. But, man, it's been rough. I want to roster a wide receiver that does not goose egg this week. That's all I asked for. All I asked for. But anyway, up top, we have Davante Adams at $8,000. Pretty much the best wide receiver in football this season. He has been absolutely insane. Didn't go off last week, but he still got into the end zone, which is something he does pretty much every single week, and I assume he's going to have a pretty strong game here. And if you're worried about the snow, I'm not sure why you are, because he had one of the best games of the season so far versus the Tennessee Titans when it was snowing the entire game. I mean, it did not impact his footwork whatsoever. I remember last year versus the Giants, it was some ice storm, whatever it was super windy. I think he had 2 or 3 touchdowns in the game. So weather does not matter for Davante Adams. Him and Aaron Rodgers played just fine in the snow. So I'm hoping that would keep people off him because I think that's kind of silly. But good matchup here versus Tampa Buccaneers. I know he struggled versus them in their first matchup, but things have changed since then. They're still 21st versus wide receivers this season, despite being 5th DVA versus the pass, allowing close to 200 receiving yards per game just to wide receivers. And we know Davante Adams, the numbers have been absolutely insane for him. He scores a touchdown every single week, it seems like, averaging 1.3 receiving touchdowns per game this year, close to a 35% target share, and close to a 40% weighted opportunity share with an 80% weighted opportunity share. So Davante Adams, he is the wide receiver one on this slate, and I think you're going to be able to afford him. So if you can only afford one of these guys, I think it just matters what quarterback you roster. Because if you roster Mahomes, you'd probably want Tyreek Hill, although you could throw Travis Kelce in the mix as well. So if you do roster Mahomes, I wouldn't say you absolutely have to play Tyreek Hill as long as you have Travis Kelce, but you definitely need at least one of those guys, preferably 2, but at least 1. And then Aaron Rodgers, you'd want Davante Adams, and Josh Allen, you'd obviously want Stephon Diggs, and Tom Brady, I mean, yeah, you'd want one of his options, and Chris Godwin, who I do have listed here, or Mike Evans, or Antonio Brown. I know he is questionable, but whatever quarterback you roster, you definitely want pass catching options from because it just makes sense on a small slate. But yeah, Davante Adams, he's wide receiver 1 here. Tyreek Hill is $7,200, so keep in mind that Patrick Mahomes happened to not get cleared for this game. It's a massive, massive downgrade for all the Kansas City Chiefs offensive pieces, and I probably wouldn't roster any of these guys because they are priced up. And if Mahomes is not playing, you don't want to roster these guys at their full price tags. But this price tag on Tyreek Hill is actually not bad. Only $7,200. We usually see him closer to $8,000, sometimes even close to $9,000 in the regular season. But for a team total of 28.25, I mean, if you want to fade Adams, it's definitely scary. But if you want to fade him, Tyreek Hill has been pretty consistent this season. He hasn't been quite Davante Adams, but we know the ceiling is super, super high. And really, the floor has been there all season long. He gets nearly double-digit targets every single week. It seems like he scores every single week. Doesn't get quite the target share that he does because obviously he's got to share with Travis Kelce, but his targets are quite valuable. He also gets the ball down the field quite a bit. We know that Tyreek Hill is a burner, 12.7 ADOT this season, and close to 90 receiving yards and close to 9 targets. Now the matchup here versus Buffalo, it's not the great. I know they struggle versus quarterbacks, but they're pretty good versus wide receivers, allowing the 7th fewest points per game to the position and their 12th DVA versus the pass. But I mean, I don't really care about matchups too much when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, because it's just so hard to stop them for an entire game. So yeah, I like Tyreek Hill. It just really comes down to what quarterback you roster on this slate, to be honest. And then Stephon Diggs at $7,000. I know the matchup here isn't great versus Kansas City. I believe they're allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to the wide receiver position this year, only 134 receiving yards, and they're also 16th DVA versus the pass. But Diggs has been just so good this year. He has not had a game below double-digit points, and even in tough matchups, the guy just pulls through, it seems like, every single time. Like last week versus Baltimore was a pretty tough matchup, but he still had 27.6 points, got over 100 yards, and found the end zone. So he's pretty much the most reliable wide receiver in football this year, maybe outside of Davante Adams, although Davante Adams has had a game below double-digit points. That's not something Stephon Diggs can say this year. So yeah, I like him quite a bit. Now, I guess if you had to pick one, I think you can make a case for Stephon Diggs' point per otherwise because he's only $7,000. I also like Josh Allen quite a bit, so I really like all these Bills offensive pieces, but that price on Diggs is pretty nice. Over 10 targets per game this year, close to a 30% target share, close to a 35% weight opportunity share. I don't think you guys need me to tell you that Stephon Diggs is good at football. I think the numbers speak for themselves. And like I said, the matchup is tough, but I don't really care too much about matchups when it comes to Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, and those guys. And this is definitely a good game to stack up. A lot of good options here, especially in the passing game. We got Mahomes, you have Josh Allen, you have Tyreek Hill, you have Stephon Diggs, you have Travis Kelce, then you have, I guess, Dawson Knox. It's definitely not a fun comparison there, but you still got John Brown and Cole Beasley, some nice secondary options for the Bills, so definitely going to be a fun game with that 53.5 point over-under. Then Chris Godwin here at $5,400. So I mainly like the price tag here. I wouldn't say he's my favorite play in the slate, but we can't spend up for everybody. We can't afford like a Patrick Mahomes, Adams, Hill, Diggs lineup with Aaron Jones. It's just not how it works, so we're going to have to find some value. I do like this price tag on Chris Godwin, and he should be able to avoid Jaire Alexander for the most part this game, because Alexander's only played in the slot about 4% of the time this year, and Chris Godwin's been in the slot on 66% of his routes. So for the majority of the game, I assume he's not going to be on Jaire Alexander, which is definitely a big boost for him, because the Packers' pass defense, it has been good this season, on the 4th fewest points for the wide receiver position, but it's going to be pretty hard to stop Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown, and I assume Mike Evans is going to have the toughest matchup between all those guys, or maybe even Antonio Brown, so I do like Chris Godwin here, as you should get the softer spot in this defense. And then after that, we have two value options in John Brown and Cole Beasley. Now, it's been kind of tough rostering these two guys, because on the first slate, which was a couple weeks ago, I rostered John Brown over Cole Beasley. John Brown gets 0 points. Cole Beasley gets, like 12 to 14 points. And then the next slate, I wasn't just chasing. I just thought it made more sense to play Cole Beasley over John Brown that slate. So I played Cole Beasley over John Brown. John Brown has the decent game, and then Cole Beasley gets a goose egg. So I've been picking these guys wrong. So I have both listed here. I think John Brown's more of an exciting play. Meanwhile, Cole Beasley is more of the safer play. I can't imagine he's going to goose egg again. I know he's been dealing with that injury, but I think he's going to be good to go here, and they're obviously going to see softer coverage from Stephon Diggs, so they should have some softer zones here to work with. So both are fine. John Brown's more of a home run hitter. Cole Beasley's more of like a safer cash option in my opinion, because on the season, Beasley's getting around 6-7 targets per game, meanwhile John Brown's at 5.5 targets. Beasley's got the higher target share, but Brown has the 8 out of 12.4, and Cole Beasley has the 8 out of 8. So he's more of the possession wide receiver. So it's just kind of what you think fits your lineup better. If you need some more upside, I think John Brown fits that bill. If you need some more of a safer floor, I think Cole Beasley fits that bill just a little bit better. Again, not the best matchup in the world versus the Kansas City Chiefs, but I still think guys are both viable. And if you're using Josh Allen, I think it would make some sense to pair him with some of his cheaper pass catching options. Then moving on to the tight end position, it's kind of Travis Kelce or bust here. Now Robert Tonyan's a fine option as well. He seems to score every single week. But up top, Kelce, $8,000. I know he's expensive, but I think he's just one of the by far best plays in the entire slate. Now, I think a lot of people are going to have the dilemma if they want to spend up for Travis Kelce or if they want to get like 2 expensive wide receivers in, because we should be able to afford at least one, like a Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams. But then we're going to have to try to fit in Travis Kelce. I don't think we're going to be able to get 3. If we can get 3, great. I've not tried to do that yet. But I think you're going to want Travis Kelce, because the rest of the tight ends compared to Travis Kelce, it's just such a big gap. And you can't say that for the wide receivers, because, again, all those guys are excellent. If we go back to the wide receivers, the difference between Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, it's not that drastic. But the difference between Travis Kelce, Gronk, Dawson Knox, and Robert Tonyan is absolutely massive. Now, Tanyan's actually relatively safe. He just doesn't get quite that volume, but he tends to score a lot. I mean, Aaron Rodgers throws a lot of touchdowns, but he just doesn't get the volume that Travis Kelce does, and he just goes off every single week. He's almost a lock for 100 yards and a touchdown, it seems like, weekly, and this is a good matchup versus the Buffalo Bills. They rank 28th versus tight ends, meaning they're allowing the 5th most points per game to the position, and Travis Kelce is by far the best tight end in football, so I think it would make sense to make him a priority in my lineups. I'm not saying you have to fade one of those high-end wide receivers to get Travis Kelce in, but I really think it would make sense to at least get one of those high-end wide receivers and then get Travis Kelce in there as well. Then moving down to Robert Tonyan at $3,600. Pretty good matchup here versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have struggled versus tight ends this season. They do rank 23rd versus the position, despite being 5th DVA versus the pass, so it has been a soft spot in their defense. Now, the volume isn't anything like Travis Kelce. Kelce's getting close to 10 targets per game. Robert Tonyan's below 4, but they're both scoring a lot of touchdowns, but 11% target share and only 36 receiving yards per game. I know it's not fair to compare these guys to Travis Kelce because he's in a league of his own, but when you do compare them, the numbers do look pretty pedestrian. But at only $3,600, I think there's a decent chance he gets into the end zone. And if you want to go double tight end, I don't think that's a bad idea. I've done that quite a few times this season, and it hasn't been the worst thing in the world. I did that last week with Travis Kelce, Austin Hooper. I know Austin Hooper didn't have the best game in the world, but it did allow me to spend up for other places that make my lineup at least pretty solid. So I wouldn't mind doing that again here with like a Tonyan and a Travis Kelce or a Travis Kelce and a Dawson Knox. It's just the upside for these guys compared to Travis Kelce are just pretty low. And then Dawson Knox at $2,800. He's good for a handful of targets every single week, but it's definitely not the most exciting play in the world. He actually is averaging more targets per game than Robert Tonyan, though, just at 3.75 compared to 3.63. He does get into the end zone from time to time, but it's nothing too consistent. But near 10% target share. If you roster Josh Allen, you want a really cheap pass catching option with him to open up your lineup a bit. I don't hate the idea of using Dawson Knox. Also, they struggle versus tight ends this season. They do rank 26th versus the position. So if you can get a cheap touchdown of Dawson Knox, I like his chances of being able to help your lineup out a bit because he is really cheap and he can allow you to spend up in other positions. So I do think Dawson Knox is definitely viable for the price tag. Then the defense is never really fun to talk about, but if you want to just pick the favorites, I think that would make sense. The Packers here are going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're playing at home. It's supposed to snow. Most of those guys are used to playing in Florida. Now, Tom Brady, he's got plenty of experience in the snow in New England, so I'm not too concerned there, and he's the guy that's going to be controlling the offense, so I don't think that's really a good narrative to use, but they are 3.5-point favorites with the lowest implied team total against them, so if you got the money for them, it would make sense to want to use them. The Chiefs are only $3,100 going against Josh Allen. I don't love that, but they do have the second lowest implied team total. They're also playing at home. They're 3-point favorites, so it never feels good to play defense against Josh Allen, but we definitely have to do some uncomfortable things here because all 4 of these quarterbacks are pretty darn good. Mahomes, Allen, Rodgers, Tom Brady. We wouldn't normally use defenses against them, but we absolutely have to here, so not too excited about it, but we have to make some tough decisions here. The Bills defense, if Patrick Mahomes happened to get rolled out, that's where everyone would flock to at only $2,800 they paid off last week versus Lamar Jackson, but if Mahomes is in, I just can't really recommend playing a defense against him. And then the Buccaneers defense at $2,700. Maybe you could go there just because they're cheap. It's supposed to snow in this game. 27.25 applied team total. I know it's the second highest on this slate, but maybe they hold the Packers to like 21 points. And if that's the case, I don't think they're going to get absolutely killed at $2,700. And they do have a decent defense, but it's definitely gotten a little bit worse as the season has progressed. But I mean, I would just pick and choose your defense, whatever fits your lineup, to be honest. Hopefully one of these defenses doesn't get a defensive touchdown and ruin the slate, but sometimes that happens. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Hit the notification bell as well. Hit the link down below if you want access to Patreon, if you want to get at the spreadsheets, the cheat sheets, the notes, projections, all that good stuff in the Discord chat. And if you don't follow me over on social media, handles in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. But I think that's about it, so I'll stop rambling now, and I'll see you guys in the next video.